the Publican, the Pharisee, and the importance of self-understanding. Sometimes we don't understand what sin is in our lives. I recall when I was back in my Anglican seminary days, there were a couple people who were kind of like against me and wanted me to get in trouble, if you will. And, well, I was a bit of a tool, so you could do this. I had like a mohawk going into seminary, so that was a short one, not a tall, spiky one, right? So that might give you a little bit of the impression. So I can understand why they didn't like me. Okay, I'm a California boy, and okay, I had some problem with some of the Southerners there. So I get called into the principal's office, blessed memory, Father Pei, and he's misinterpreted these reports about me. They were unfair. They were not true. They weren't founded on reality. And he says to me, "You have hubris, and it takes one to know one." And I thought to myself, what you're saying isn't founded in reality, so I don't take what you're saying to heart, because your accusations are false against me. And then I went home, and I thought hubris is an interesting word. Why didn't he just say pride? Why did he say hubris? So I looked up hubris. Hubris is thinking more about yourself than you ought to. Now I was offended. Because he's saying I should think less of myself than I was thinking, right? So he was wrong in the first kind of pride that he had leveled against me, but actually the fact that I was so offended that he thought that I should think less of myself than I currently did indicates pride. And this is how the sins often are. We think we're free of sin because we've only allowed our minds to navigate in one direction of what we think sin is. So I'm speaking to this lady at the doctor's office the other day, and she's funny. She's a character, but we get to talking, and she says, "Well, I don't go to church because I'm a good person." Right? And well, what is a good person to you? Well, you know, this. Oh, okay. So basically, here's how we do it. We determine what a good person is based on some kind of like artificial model, right? I mean, I can make myself a really good person if I just, compare myself to Hitler. I'm doing pretty good. I'm a very good person because I'm not like Hitler. And the reality is the comparison, the model is Jesus, which then when we begin to compare ourselves to Christ, well, we don't stand in such good light. And that gives us a greater reality of the distinction between good and bad. God is ultimately good, and we are somewhere on a spectrum between bad and good. And that's really the standard. And when we start looking at that mirror, that perfect mirror of the image of Christ, well, we turn out to be not so great, not so fantastic. And that's why I've been taking you through this kind of course on the Ten Commandments, to give you a deeper understanding of what the Ten Commandments are, so that we'll be able to see ourselves more clearly. It wasn't until those same days as an early Anglican that I began to think about my thinking. And the way that I did, I was reading this teacher, Evagrius Ponticus, who talks about the thoughts, the way that the evil thoughts attack our minds, right? And that's when I began to think about how I thought. And when I started really thinking about the way that I thought, I realized I'm a lot more sinful than I really thought previously. Right? Because if you just go throughout your day and think about how often pride motivates the thought life, it's profound. I mean, really, just go through your day. Just try this, okay? This is why the Jesus prayer helps so much, by the way. Try this. Just think about your thinking. What am I thinking right now? Okay, well, what am I thinking right now? Is this virtuous or is this vicious? And if you find that it's vicious, guess what? You just notice the sinful nature within you. Now try to see the virtuous thoughts. So oftentimes I'll think about the virtuous thoughts, and then I'll realize, boy, I'm obsessed with this virtuous thought. Right? Not with God. Oh, now I've committed idolatry with this virtuous thought. And oftentimes I think the virtuous thought, and then I realize I want someone else to see that I thought the virtuous thought. And now I fell into pride again. Man, this is such a good, most virtuous thought. I have to share it with other people. Why? Why do I have to share it with other people? Well, because they need to know I can think virtuously. It is this never-ending cycle. Once you begin to actually think about your thinking, you realize your thinking is not so great. We're not so great. And so it becomes really important if we want to have an accurate understanding, in other words, not live a life of delusion, self-deception, to actually process what we think and why we think, and to address those deeper questions in our life. And when we do that, we come away something like the publican. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. If we really thought about our thoughts, we would never sound like the Pharisee. The Pharisee wasn't thankful that God made him the way he made him, that God's hand was in his life. He was thankful that God let him feel superior to others. That's what he was thankful for. He got to feel the sense of superiority. His pride destroyed him. His pride destroyed him. It's imperative that we know who we are. I was reading this St. Ignatius of Briankonov. He's giving advice to this young man who's asking about monasticism, and he says, do not think that ignorance is an insignificant evil. The Holy Fathers call ignorance a great, even foundational evil, from which evil grows in its full potential. Ignorance does not recognize its own lack of knowledge. It is content with its own apparent knowledge, said St. Peter of Damascus. It's capable of much evil without even realizing it. I say this because I feel sorry for such people who do not understand what the true dignity of man is, especially for Christians who do not know what Christianity is and end up acting in their ignorance against their own interests. I think that's a profound statement, and one that I encounter all the time. I can't tell you how many times I meet folks. First, let me accuse myself. I can't tell you how many times I thought I knew something until I figured out that I didn't know it very well. And that happens all the time with me. I'm constantly finding myself wrong about things. Now, I'll say it now with others. I'm constantly meeting people who want to tell me, for example, about how they know theology so well, or how they understand such and such in the spiritual life so well. And oftentimes, truth be told, I'm thinking, no, you don't. I don't know how to just say that. I'm not sure how to just say, you're ignorant. I have a hard time knowing how to say that, right? You're pretty ignorant. Like maybe if I'm really close with you, I'm willing to do it, right? I'll tell you, you're ignorant. Usually though, it looks a little different. And so you can capture this image in your face, okay? This is what I'll look like if you sound ignorant to me, okay? And you're telling me something, and I don't think you're ready to listen or to have a conversation, I'll just look like this. Okay. And here's why. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm really not. Here, Jesus said this. He said, don't cast pearls before swine. And I'm not calling you swine. But there's an analogy in here to be grasped, because sometimes we act like swine. Right? Sometimes our pride makes us act like swine. Okay? We're so sure of ourselves. We're so pig-headed, if you will. Right? And so we approach life without humility and with pride. And so others around us, right, they just kind of, sure guy. right? And this has happened especially as a teenager. I remember talking to older men, and they often had that, like, sure, guy, I'm sure you've got it figured out. You'll see, right? But they were kind about it. But they understood that I was still young and working on figuring out life a bit. Well, it's the same way. Jesus didn't force himself onto people. He really didn't. He would offer them truth. And if they wanted it, he'd give it to them. And if they didn't, ask for it. They didn't say, I want it. He wouldn't give it to them. It wasn't just that, like, well, as long as you're willing to not talk when I'm talking, I'll give it to you. He didn't do that either. It was, you had to want it. You have to want it, right? He's not going to give it to you unless he sees that you really want it. And this is kind of how we have to be with the spiritual treasures of what God's given to us, because there's no point in just throwing up information if it's not laid in receptive ground. So for this reason, Jesus said to the Pharisees, he said, I didn't come for those who can see. I came for the blind. I didn't come for those who are well. They don't need a physician. I came for those who are sick. Right? And, well, when the Pharisees heard that, they went, oh, okay, well, he's not coming for me then, because I can see and I'm whole. I'm perfect. Right? And they walked away, and Jesus didn't say, hey, come back. You didn't understand. You're blind too. No, he didn't. He let them keep going along because he knew that they were choosing ignorance. He knew that they were choosing to be prideful, so he would let them go their way, let them do their own thing, right? But to the person who said, oh, Lord, I see that I'm blind, he would say, now I'll help you to see. If they would say, I'm not whole, then he would make them whole. And so this is the saying of Jesus, to him who has, more shall be given. But to him who has not, even what he has will be taken away from him. How many humble people are in hell? You guys know the answer. 0. How many prideful people are in heaven? 0. 0. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.